In our first section of reading from Ovid, we're going to go back to Thebes. You'll recall that in the week of the class when we looked at dissolving selves, and we looked at Oedipus around the site of Thebes, and we looked at what happened with Pentheus around the site of Thebes. Ovid's going to spend some time in Thebes. I mean, he is going to spend some time in a place where things kind of fall off and go a bit wrong. That is definitely something that is interesting to him. So it's not surprising that he spends a good bit of time in reinvestigating these traditional tales around this city. Agave, yeah, she makes a mistake. There's her son's head. She's carrying in, thinking, yes, indeed, here's an animal. Well, it just really isn't. The themes of transformation, as we mentioned in the previous lecture, are hugely important for Ovid, and that change is typically violent, and it's not a happy kind of change. He is also, in his techniques, a highly learned and elusive poet. He will go ahead and assume that you know everything already that he's talking about, so he'll, at a very high level, drop in things and expect that you, deeply learned person, already know all this stuff. He's doing that because he's writing for a highly literate audience, not because he's trying to annoy contemporary human beings trying to figure out what he was talking about 2,000 years ago. He's writing for a highly literate audience that already knows all this stuff. So, imagine yourself being involved in a set of stories that you already know a lot of the background about. You get very annoyed if someone spent a lot of time filling you in on all details that you already knew about. So Ovid does this in his own retelling of tales. The figures that emerge around Thebes are worth us spending a little bit of time with. Recall at the beginning, Cadmus has his engagement. He jumps in and finds this dragon in his way, slays the dragon, takes the teeth and tosses them into the ground. We're going to see the slaying of the serpent, something that Ovid spends a lot of time on. He likes to kind of jump into this gory violence. He's not afraid of that at all. We've got the lavish treatment of the serpent getting cut down, and then the magic, the excitement of the transition that happens when these plants all of a sudden become humans and start to move and engage. From that background, we focus in on Actaeon, Semele. We have a story of Tiresias. We talk about Narcissus. We talk about Pentheus. All the kind of main themes in these different sets of the family centered in Cadmus and around Thebes. In Actaeon, the scene of Actaeon is one we can spend a little bit of time with. He spends, sadly, he gets a glimpse, sadly, of this woman right here, Diana. Once again, if you ever caught a glimpse of her, you should be very cautious, run the other way. There's a strong intimacy in this scene. It's a close-up detail of the life of the goddess Diana. What's she doing? Well, she's like in the bathroom. She's putting on makeup and grooming herself, and it's just strongly close in, very intimate, and it's something that we ought not to see. You're not supposed to see that about strangers, and you're surely not supposed to see that about goddesses. Ovid's alluding, I think, and allowing, in his presentation of the scene, Ovid's allowing us to be like Pentheus and kind of catch this special furtive glance at what it is to be a goddess. He's inviting us to commit the same crime that Actaeon does, looking with ogling eyes as, oh my gosh, that's a goddess. Ooh, what's she doing over there? We get kind of pulled right in. Note that when Diana reacts to what's happening, she is embarrassed. She actually blushes. So we've got a goddess that blushes. That in itself is embarrassing. Imagine a divinity blushing. I mean, it's just crazy. Who could think that such a thing would happen? But it does. Diana is embarrassed and she blushes. At that point, all hell breaks loose. She has out after him. Actaeon gets chowed up by his own dogs, turned into an animal, and you can see his horns sprouting from his head in this depiction. We hear a story of Semele, and the description of Semele's story, I want to focus in on one particular piece of it. Juno is prodding her and trying to get her to doubt that it was really Zeus that came to her, right? Whoever your lover was, young girl, you should just make sure that you know who that is, because so often men go around claiming to be gods. Well, that little seed of doubt that Juno plants in Semele's head is her undoing. She then insists that Zeus should show himself to her, and does this in such a way that Zeus can't deny it, so that when she gets the full view of Zeus, she gets immolated and she's destroyed. So the seed of doubt that Juno plants turns into her undoing, and she is caught up and gone. Now, just as in the case of Actaeon and Diana, in the case of Semele and Juno, the line between human and divine is psychologized. In the case of Actaeon, the reaction of Diana is embarrassment. In the case of Juno, it's doubt and jealousy. There's a psychological, emotional reading of what happens when human and divine come together. Tiresias, we get to hear about Tiresias, long story. We get inside of his head, but mostly just so that we can get inside the tale of Narcissus. He's a way of us getting into a story about someone who Tiresias knows all kinds of things. How does he know this? Well, it turns out that he has uniquely been able to experience sex as both a man and a woman. And because of this experiential dimension that he has now all knowledge. Those two pieces of knowingness add up to a total knowledge. It's like they're multiplicatory. And now Tiresias has a full knowledge of all things. Juno is, of course, jealous. Juno is typically jealous, and she then blinds him. Just as she does when she takes away the voice of Echo. We'll see this. She punishes humans by making them defective. She might take away their eyesight or their voice or whatever it happens to be, and then typically other things happen after that. Narcissus, we get into his story, and some of you will recall hearing about the story of Narcissus, and you might recall it as a tale about where flowers come from. Where did this beautiful flower come from? Well, there's a story of a guy, and he gets frozen. He gets transfixed on his own vision, a vision of himself at a pond, and he just stands there and he turns into a flower. Well, that's usually the way it's retold for the kind of kids' versions of the story. But think about the way that Ovid presents this story here. Remember what Tiresias runs into. He's told by Narcissus runs into. He's told by Tiresias that he'll be fine as long as he never knows himself. Well, in this story, what we've got is Narcissus knowing himself. And what he does is see himself as an object. He himself is, like you and I, a subject. He's able to see and think about the world. He himself has his own person. When he sees himself as an object, he gets frozen. And in Ovid's case, it's packaged for us as a kind of erotic love, which is completely misplaced. But I think there's a further dimension to this story about what it is to be human. It's strange to be a self-aware, self-conscious subjectivity. It would be a little easier not to be one of those. If I were my puppy, I've got a little puppy, and if I were my puppy right now, there'd be no question about what I wanted. I'd be happy if I had some food in my bowl and if I could go for a walk. That would be enough. As a self-conscious human being, life is a little more complicated. Most of the time that's good, but some of the times it's not so good. And that complexity to life I think leads here in a kind of capstone experience for Narcissus of understanding, sure, lots of things about the world out there and having to make complex decisions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But now Narcissus understands himself, a knowing subject, as an object to other people. Now that's really strange because he is not only himself a subjectivity who can see, sense, and feel things, but he's also an object to other people. That is a disturbing recognition, and that disturbing recognition, I think, freezes him in a state where he can't advance from. So his life ends there. He doesn't get out of the greased funnel of self-contemplation. Staring into his navel turns out for Narcissus to be a very bad thing. We then hear the story of Pentheus. Sorry. Narcissus closes, we come back to Tiresias, and we hear about Tiresias' duel with Pentheus, and then the Pentheus tale jumps in, but for Ovid it's really more of a story about Pentheus versus Tiresias, where you hear the full backstory, but he shifts it in quite dramatically to make it more of a discussion between Pentheus and Tiresias. We get a further story about Bacchus's birth and his coming into being, and men who don't recognize that they have a god around them. That's troublesome. And the full story of what we saw happening at Thebes in the earlier parts of the course gets played out through these close-in connections between the human and the divine world. Here, Narcissus, look at him. poor guy. He can't get out of that greased funnel of self-contemplation. And each of the stories that we see framed in this set of Theban tales in Ovid, Actaeon, Semele, Tiresias, Echo and Narcissus, and Pentheus, talks about a close-in connection between the human and the divine. Something goes terribly wrong, and that close-in connection is psychologized. It's shown in the case of Actaeon in Diana's embarrassment. In Semele, it comes out as jealousy, and Semele herself might be actually a little bit embarrassed. We hear about Pentheus, who's uninitiated and wanting to see what he ought not to see, temptation. And in the case of Narcissus, his emotional attraction to himself becomes his undoing. These passions show that the human transgression vis-a-vis the divine leads to some kind of problem. That problem, it shows in a psychological manifestation, and it ends in a corporeal undoing. The human being dissolves, is ripped up, is torn, and we separate now humans and divine, because as humans might aspire to get a glimpse of that other divine world, what we see mostly there is danger. So stay away.